Well, I'm finally doing this episode. What's up, guys? I'm DK, and you're watching Pro Wrestling What If, the series where I look at the different what if scenarios as terms of the world that we call professional wrestling. I knew at some point throughout this series that I would eventually have to cover this, with this being released literally less than 1 week before the 25th anniversary of the unfortunate incident. To give a little recap in case some people might actually not know what had happened, back at Over the Edge in 1999, Owen Hart under the Blue Blazer gimmick was set to make a superhero-like entrance, and he would use a rigging system that would bring him down from a scaffolding system all the way down to the ring. However, a mishap had happened where it had let go, and Owen Hart had fell more than 70 feet in the air and hit smack dab in the ring and unfortunately passed away. His widow at this point, Martha, would file many lawsuits against the WWE, and to this day we will never have, let's say, Owen Hart action figures, Owen Hart featured in the WWE video game, or Owen Hart in the WWE Hall of Fame, since Martha doesn't want WWE glorifying Owen Hart's career in any way. Which, before I begin this what if, which will be in the format of the 5 big points, all of you need to go into this episode with the mindset that Owen Hart not only survived the incident, but that he actually had the right rigging system that would have let him down to make that entrance. Because if I would have just said if he had survived, then I'm sure that quite a bit of views would be trolling me in the comment section below saying there was literally no way of surviving. So of course, let's begin this episode of What If Owen Hart Was Still Alive Today. So the first part I want to bring up is, of course, Owen Hart would become the Intercontinental Champion at Over the Edge. That night that Owen Hart had passed away, he was actually scheduled as the Blue Blazer to defeat the Godfather for the Intercontinental Championship. But I also wanted to bring up this point because a lot of us wonder what exactly was going to happen during this reign as Intercontinental Champion. Some people have mentioned on many Reddit posts that Owen Hart was going to ditch the gimmick the next night and just be Owen Hart again. I think that Vince McMahon most likely would still be booking him as the Blue Blazer gimmick for months to come. And I don't think it would lead to, let's say, him dropping the title to China like Jeff Jarrett did in the real timeline, because of course Owen Hart was notorious for turning down a lot of storylines, especially the proposed storyline of an affair angle involving Deborah. However, one of the posts that I did see on, let's say, Reddit posts is that I think this would have led to a one-on-one match between him and Jeff Jarrett at that year's SummerSlam for the Intercontinental Championship, which would result in Owen Hart turning babyface. Owen Hart and Jeff Jarrett were tag team partners at this particular point, and so I think it would make sense that this would lead to some sort of betrayal from the tag team, and that there would be a one-on-one feud between Owen and Jeff Jarrett. So if anything, he would still be the Blue Blazer for a few more months, but when it comes to the build-up near SummerSlam, where most likely this match would happen, that I think finally the Blue Blazer gimmick is gone, and hopefully gone forever at this point. The second point of what I would think would happen if Owen Hart was still alive is that he would have had a major career resurgence. Now, Chris Jericho had mentioned on the Owen Hart edition of Dark Side of the Ring that Owen Hart would have a career resurgence with having instant classic matches with various different people. And I actually do agree because of the superstars that he did mention. Because less than 3 months after that incident, Chris Jericho himself actually made his debut in WWE after defecting from WCW. Then going into the fall that year, Kurt Angle would be debuting in WWE at Survivor Series, and then right at the beginning of 2000, we would have the debut of the Radicals of Perry Saturn, Dean Malenko, Eddie Guerrero, and Chris Benoit. So 6 of those superstars, Owen Hart would have definitely had these pretty much 5-star classic matches and would have really reinvented himself as a superstar, even to the point to where we can finally see Owen Hart most likely be a part of not just the mid-card and the upper mid-card picture, but he would probably be actually in the World Championship picture, as many people wish he would have been. And I think one of the big storylines that would propel Owen Hart to the main event picture is that I think he would have been the one that ended up hitting Stone Cold Steve Austin with the car at Survivor Series 1999. It was already described while trying to figure out who did the incident that it was someone with blonde hair that had hit Stone Cold with the car. And of course, Rikishi did have blonde hair, but so did Owen Hart. So it definitely would have made sense, especially tying back to SummerSlam 1997, where Owen Hart had broken Steve Austin's neck with that sit-out tombstone pile driver. So I think they could have taken that that aspect and make it more of a work shoot angle into making Owen be actually the guy who had hit Stone Cold with the car and actually trying to end his career. This definitely leads into my third point, which of course my third point is that I think at some point he would become the WWE Champion. Now, I don't think he would have had multiple reigns as the WWE Champion, but I think Owen Hart would have at least had the title once. And one thing that has been discussed about with a lot of fans is exactly when Owen Hart's contract was set to expire, in which many sources say that Owen Hart's contract at the point of the incident that led to Owen's death still had 2 to 3 years left on it. So that would be either 2001 or 2002 that Owen Hart's contract would set to expire. And it actually has had a huge divide on people saying it would be 2001 or it would be 2002 when that expires. But I actually made a scenario for each of those years of when Owen Hart could possibly get his first and only WWE Championship reign. So if you are in the group that believes that his contract was going to expire in 2001, I think that Owen Hart would have taken the place of Kurt Angle in 2000, where he would defeat The Rock and become the WWE Champion at no mercy, and it would lead to him dropping the title back to The Rock or maybe Stone Cold at No Way Out 2001. And that would play right exactly at the same time that it was revealed that Rikishi was the one to hit Stone Cold Steve Austin with the car. So this incident would have propelled him as a top heel of the WWE and would have him hold the championship. Now, unfortunately, I don't think that they would have Owen Hart as the main event of WrestleMania 17 with the Royal Rumble winner Stone Cold Steve Austin, because I feel like it was already determined probably either between SummerSlam or No Mercy that they would take the face of the Attitude Era in Stone Cold and put him up against basically the face of the Attitude Era and was just as much of a face while Stone Cold was away with The Rock, and clash those two icons together as the main event. So I think it may actually work out either way, where if they wanted to conclude the storyline before that match had happened, that Stone Cold would actually be the one to win the title at No Way Out, and maybe The Rock is the one that would end up winning the 2001 Royal Rumble, which in this case would make Rock a two-time back-to-back Royal Rumble winner. But regardless, I still think it was dead set that it was going to be Rock versus Austin Part 2 at WrestleMania 17, and that Owen Hart would have to have some sort of other match, unfortunately. And if you're in the group that believes that his contract was going to expire in 2002, then I think that Owen Hart would have taken the place of Chris Jericho and become the first undisputed WWE Champion at Vengeance 2001. And I think at this point, Owen would be rewarded a championship, considering of all the stuff that he's been put through, especially actually deciding to stay with WWE instead of joining Bret, Jim Neidhart, and Davey Boy to WCW after the Montreal Screwjob, and then of course using the Blue Blazer gimmick once again and putting up with that. So I think after all that, Owen Hart would finally be rewarded for being a trooper, and that he would finally win the WWE Championship here and become the first undisputed champion. He would still have those Royal Rumble and No Way Out matches, and would ultimately drop the undisputed championship to Triple H at WrestleMania 18. And that could actually be a perfect place for Owen Hart's career to end with WWE, considering that WrestleMania 18 took place in Toronto, Canada. Of course, Canada being the home country of Owen Hart. So I think those could have been two perfect scenarios for two different years that Owen Hart could have won his first and most likely only WWE Championship. Now, the fourth thing I think would happen if Owen Hart was still alive is that Bret Hart would have been back in WWE much sooner than he had. Now, Owen Hart has always kind of been the problem solver, realistically, where he was always in the middle of everything and that he didn't choose sides. He tried to help out and reconnect people. And I think in this case, especially if you've seen the clip during the Montreal Screwjob of him whispering in Bret Hart's ear, it was mainly to calm him down about the whole situation. And it was also shown on the Dark Side of the Ring episode of that incident. So I think at some point, Owen would have been able to help Bret and Vince McMahon reconnect reconnect and hash out their issues, and that maybe we could even see Bret Hart inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame much sooner, probably in 2004 when it makes his return for the first time in many years. And for all we know, talking about the whole thing about Owen Hart basically main eventing a WrestleMania in Canada, with Bret and Vince rehashing their issues, maybe Bret Hart could be involved at WrestleMania 18 in some sort of way. And it was rumored for a while that Bret Hart would have a match possibly with Kurt Angle, which would have been a technical classic, but having only been a couple of years removed from the incident with Goldberg, then I think realistically that Bret Hart would be involved in a non-wrestling way. Realistically, who knows? Maybe he would try and help out Owen retain the championship at WrestleMania 18 in that sort of timeline. Now, the fifth point I wanted to bring up is talking about life after WWE. And I think this is one of the biggest things because we've heard many times from, let's say, even Martha herself, that after Owen Hart's contract was set to expire, that he was planning on officially retiring from professional wrestling so that he can spend time with his family and then pursue a career, I believe, in either teaching or being a firefighter. But I actually think Owen Hart doesn't retire from professional wrestling. However, he would get a much lighter schedule as he continues with wrestling, and the perfect place to do that is the brand new company at this point of TNA, Total Non-Stop Action Wrestling, a company that of course is founded by one of Owen Hart's closest friends in Jeff Jarrett. So I think Jeff Jarrett would have offered a contract to Owen Hart that would feature a lot of money and a much lighter schedule than he would have in WWE. So that way he would continue to wrestle and of course spend a lot of time watching his family grow. And in my mind, I think had Owen Hart actually signed with TNA in 2002, I think that instead of Ken Shamrock, he would have been the one to actually become the first NWA World Champion under the TNA banner. And can you imagine the potential matches that Owen Hart would have had he been in TNA? Like, already right at the top of my mind, Owen Hart versus AJ Styles would have been some sort of instant classic, and I think Owen Hart even would have been able to help elevate the X division to heights that already it reached, but much higher than it already had. And then you're probably wondering about, would Owen Hart of course be in the Hall of Fame? And I think he would, but in my mind, I don't know if he would actually get a solo induction into the Hall of Fame. If anything, I think he would actually be inducted as a part of the Hart Foundation, which of course, they did the tag team iteration of the Hart Foundation from the late 80s and early 90s with Jim Neidhart and Bret Hart, but I think in this case, we'd actually get the faction from just before the Attitude Era in the 90s, where we would feature, of course, Jim Neidhart, Bret Hart, Owen Hart himself, Davey Boy Smith, and Brian Pillman, because I still think that that group made a huge impact for the short amount of time that that faction had lived, and that it's a way to induct all 5 of those inductees into the Hall of Fame instead of doing separate ones for each superstar. However, I would agree, of course, that Owen Hart would deserve at some point a solo inductee, but I think the first one he would get would have been the Hart Foundation induction. Anyways, guys, that's gonna be the end of this edition of Pro Wrestling What If. And if you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Press the notification bell for future episodes and share this to all your friends. And let me know what you would think, what would happen if Owen Hart was still alive today. And I hope to see you guys on next week's edition of Pro Wrestling What If.